Welcome, one and all. My name is Lex.
I'm Hazen Fields II.
And I am Trey. What's good, peeps of the interwebs? How y'all feeling?
And this is Various Fields. And guys, you know something I think we're really good at?
What's that?
Talking. We talk a lot. And as this podcast, you can tell that we talk a lot.
We do.
But you know what we actually need or require for podcasts to work? We need people to listen.
People like you.
Yeah. So
Thank you
this topic today is all about listening.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
See, right there. And this topic today is all about listening.
Fantastic.
And how I feel like I talk too much and I need to listen more. And I have this idea, topic, thing, thought, project. I don't know why I'm going too far with this. All I'm saying is that listening is a skill. And I want to know, guys, how do you feel about listening? What is a skill that you've learned about listening? How can you teach one like myself who's talking too much currently to listen? I feel like Trey's doing a good job at it.
Well, I hear you, and I appreciate you bringing up this conversation.
Wow.
All right. I believe that listening is very much a skill. I think in terms of self-expression, everyone wants to talk about, what interests them and what might be concerning to them, right? And it's always good to feel important in any one individual's life, right? But no one really understands or wants to connect with an individual, particularly when they're talking all about themselves, as an example, right? How your day is going, what your cat did on TikTok, or what you ate, or what you decided to post on Instagram. All of that's relevant, which is why we have social media, right? But I think that heart-to-heart, that one-on-one is often lost because of all of that as well, all right? I think it's very important to listen to an individual because sometimes you lose those connections if you think it's all about you, right? And I think there was an axiom out there saying that everyone's favorite subject is themselves, right? So the best way to get into, I guess, a person's social sphere is to have them express about themselves more often to you, and you listen and relate to them according to the topics that might be interested to them, right? You go out to any date and you go all share a particular restaurant in common, right? You guys can talk not just about yourselves, but that restaurant in common because you both heard and understood each other as to what you guys like to eat, as an example, right? You guys can go out, not just dating-wise, but if there's a friend group that you're into, and either they are interested in books, skating, or basketball, whatever the case may be, you guys can all relate on those one things if you guys take the time to listen to one another about what your favorite subjects are, and just relate on any one thing that you guys can get on.
Oh, wow, I like that.
So it's not just, if I'm listening correctly, it's not just about hearing the person or just connecting, but it's also about the interconnectivity you have with that relationship.
Correct.
So friend, family member, deep relationship, partnership, romantic relationship, stuff like that, whatever you want to define it as. It's not just hearing that person, but also those combined experiences, learning about each other also informs how you listen, and you apply that to how you listen.
Right. I feel as if whenever it comes down to I consider myself an introvert, right? And I don't express myself as often in public, right? But I do like being able to relate to people, right? The best way for me to relate to people is to say hey, I remember that story you told me about this, that, and that. How is that going, right? And I continue on to that story because I'm sure an individual would want to say, oh, I resolved it, or maybe I need help in resolving such a thing, right? Not for the sake of me giving an answer to that or giving a resolution to that one question, right? But being able to listen to them and their worries, or along with all the listening I've done in the past, I might have something of a parable in the back of my mind to apply to their certain situation, and then helping them fix it, not for my own sake, but for them to progress in their own story.
Wow. Well,
Where'd you get two bulls from?
I'm sorry?
Where'd you get two bulls from?
Two bulls?
You said a parable. Sorry, I wasn't.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
I think you misheard me.
Misheard.
My bad.
Well, listen, I like this subject because listening, we all do it. We all have the ability to do it.
We don't.
We all have ears. Objectively,
we don't.
For those that are hearing this, I'm assuming we have at least one ear.
Right, but the thing is listening must be done in different forms, places in your life.
Right.
I think that if you're a manager of a company or in a business, or you have your own business, your listening skills are very, very important in terms of those who are employed by you. I believe that even as someone who is employed, listening is very important. And I think one of the things about listening, and I'm going to throw something out there that we may get in. I'm going, I like to throw the dangerous stuff out there, because we may not be equipped to talk about this in this turn. Because I was about to throw this out. Okay, ladies, who listens better, men or women?
You're already messed up. You have the ladies, they, them binary. You're.
Oh,
Yeah. See.
So fix that for me.
No, I don't have to. I'm just saying.
Wow. But I said
I'm messing with you.
Okay.
You said you're throwing it out there. I'm like, it's not as dangerous as you thought.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, because what I'm talking from 1963 head and making it the binary choice.
People. Who's better
People.
at listening?
Interesting. Huh.
Aha.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to pursue that eventually, but let's go. But let's go further in terms of listening.
This is going to become a very dangerous listen.
No, but I think it's but listening. I think one of the things, the difference between listening and hearing, I think listening is attached to empathy and ego. In other words, if you're listening to someone else and you're listening to that person while simultaneously thinking about your reply or your response, are you truly listening?
That's hearing.
That's hearing, or and because you're focusing on what have I've got my rebuttal. I'm focusing on or am I listening and my empathy is gone? So therefore, I'm listening, but I'm not attaching myself to you in a way that I can listen to you.
I'm also going to slash that and say that's hearing. In terms of empathy, it's kind of hard, only because there are people that may not relate to your current situation, right? But can still be empathetic, all right? There are people out there who may not be able to relate because they haven't gone through a similar situation, but they can sympathize, right? In saying, for example, oh my gosh, I lost my dog. Oh yeah, I had that same situation too. My teddy bear was stolen when I was in 6th grade, and I felt like I was lost forever. And people are like, you're not listening to me. You don't understand how this feels. You had a thing. I had a
living.
Yeah, a living. Sorry. I had a pet. In which case there's a sympathy there, and was something near and dear to your heart was misplaced, taken, lost to you, right? But there is an empathy that's lost, right, in not understanding the compounding emotions that were tied to such a thing from either side, right? So you can hear an individual, all right, and still be sympathetic to the individual in their loss, right, but may not be empathetic to their loss because you haven't been able to relate to it in such a way.
All right.
I agree with that too. Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's also another thing, and that's a whole perspective thing. So it's something I had to do a lot of when I was in news for is learn how to listen. And you have to listen in a couple ways, not just listen, but you do have to listen and be aware of your own biases as you're listening. If you're going to report something and then report something in a way where it's quote unquote unbiased, you can only do that so much. But to do that, you do have to not just quiet your thoughts and be like, this person is right, this person is wrong, but you do have to be like, all right, kind of clear your mind kind of thing and just hear the person, then listen almost. It's like receive and then make sure it doesn't go through a filter of your perception, but listen to the person and understand their experience, do that. And then it's honestly a lot about, I feel like a listening is also not just hearing the person, but understanding how they're expressing, why they're expressing the way they are, and seeing if you can also connect to that level of expression. Because sometimes people who are going through a hard time, maybe if you reverse what you just gave an example of, maybe that person losing their teddy bear could have been connected to a deep family member or something like that. So it was very important to them. So that other person who compared it to a dog loss, maybe those two can never really understand, but that's because they don't see each other's emotional experience. But also, if you are listening first, you can hear something, I lost my teddy bear, and you'd be like, all right, they're crying, they're frustrated, or what kind of thing it is. This is important to them. I'm going to listen and also receive that information, even though I can't necessarily relate with it, in a way in which they're expressing it. And at the very least, they'll feel heard, they'll feel more comfortable. Sometimes in that comfortability, more things will come out. Then they'll then open up more. And I think that's what listening, it's like preparing a table. It's not just listening, and it's one of the things a friend
Preparing a table together.
preparing a table together.
Right, because that's very important. Like if you guys are setting up like for a pizza party, as opposed to like a shrimp cocktail and a banquet, right? Then you're probably putting both things on the table, right? But then the flavors clash, if you will, right? If you're going on with this analogy, right? But I think it's all
pizza,
about
red wine,
understanding like what are you presenting to the individual, all right? And what are they giving you, right? To make this as gross as possible. Are they feeding you crap? Or are they trying to actually
interesting.
provide you with something as not so much nurturing to them, but something that you can also, I guess, dish about?
I like it. I like it.
Here comes the segue.
Segue.
Well, if you like what you're listening to, you're listening to Various Fields with the three of us, and we're talking about various topics that we hope you like. And in this particular topic, if you like what you're hearing or listening, please like, share, subscribe,
hit all the buttons,
hit all the buttons,
tweet,
and
shout.
And please comment because we really want to do this, and we are trying. Our goal is to get us up to 500. We're getting really close, and we thank you for all those who have subscribed. We're asking you to do more, and by your engagement on this platform, it really helps us out a lot. So we really thank you for what you've done. But please tell your neighbors and friends to come on and join us. But
And also, please don't forget to respond to anything on under our videos and give us topics that you want us to talk about because we would love to hear what you have for us to say. Right? It's all about this communication, us putting it on the table and hearing what you want us to talk about. You know,
I like that.
We're ready to listen.
Okay,
right? Ready to listen.
Well, let me
back and forth.
Well, let's listen to this. All right. So listening is an actual verb. To listen, right, is a verb.
Indeed.
It's an action word. So you have to, they have something, I've heard people talk about active listening, and I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if you've heard of people that when they listen to one another, they, like if I want to prove that I'm listening to you, I repeat.
I objectively had to do that. I figured out I can empathize, I believe. Sympathize.
Okay, let's get the difference. Let's get the difference.
No,
do we know the difference between empathize and sympathize?
Sympathize, I'm pretty sure, is you've gone through their actual experience or you've gotten as close to that person's experience, and empathize is you may not be able to relate with their specific experience, but you can emotionally connect. I believe it's that.
No, I'm not saying but I'm going to look up the dictionary thing when you get, but continue.
All right. But I feel like I was an active listener, or had to like be an active listener to train myself to not be an active listener. I'm not sure it's the ADHD thing, but every once in a while, I would just through like, even if I really care about the person, sometimes my brain will just kind of slowly tune me out, or slowly like they'll say something or make me think of something else, and then I just kind of do that. So it was like a confirmation, like or yes, but like also to kind of keep myself geared in. Another thing I also had to do, and also had to stop doing, is sometimes to make sure I'm listening, I would stare at people's eyes, but you do the whole like stare at people's eyes intensely thing. So now something I actually have to do, which also makes people think I don't listen, is to listen the best. I have to not look at the person.
Really?
Yeah, I have to like, kind of look down
because direct eye contact makes them
because I know that if I look at the person, I think I will like facial expressions can distract me, and not in a bad way, but like I can like glance at the person. But if I'll see a grimace or something like that, then my brain will just start thinking about all this stuff. Where I'm like, if I actually have to listen, it's like a meditation thing. So I'm staring at something that makes me listen more because it's like I'm hearing them, but when I hear them, they're in my head again, and when they're in my head again, then I can like process. It's an interesting thing.
I have to say that I listen better sometimes when I close my eyes, so I can focus. Because you know what it is, there used to be I don't know if they do it too much anymore. When I was a kid, they used to have people come to the school and do hearing tests, and they would put the headphones on your ears, and then I think we'd either close our eyes or they'd put something on our face or whatever it is, and we'd have to listen to what we heard. Oh, right. Nels, it seems as though you have something to say about that. We'd love to listen to your input, Nels.
Oh, no, he just touched you. Remember it was red and blue?
Yep.
Yeah,
I remember that
Yeah.
exactly. Those high-pitched tones. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so as Nels said, if you didn't hear him, he was saying we had the red and blue headphones, and we used to indeed do that. I don't know if I don't know why I'm not seeing, or maybe because my kids are big or whatever. But or grown or whatever. But the point is, in that environment, you were focused on that which you were hearing. So it was more really testing your hearing as more than your listening. But like a superhero, you can make your ears focus more on purpose. You know, and so sometimes we don't do that. And I dare say that listening is sometimes hampered by our emotional state. If you're very, very, very angry or very, very upset, I think focusing on your listening can sometimes be hampered. Agree, disagree, what do you thought?
I agree to an extent. I will say the only reason why I have like a small thing of this, I feel like a lot of times people, the term emotional, I think has a negative connotation to it now. I don't think it's bad, but I think emotional has kind of gotten a negative connotation. And I think it depends on someone's individual emotional state where someone, let's say you feel righteously justified for something. So it's very possible like there's a certain level of anger in which they can feel in their souls where they can hear someone better if that person is expressing angrily or if they're angry enough. Like, so if you're talking about racial justice, like this is, I'm mad, and someone's like, yeah, we're mad. Like, that's what I'm talking about. I hear you now. I listen, you know what I mean? But and I'm just saying that's I will say it's situational, but I'm saying like sometimes like I feel like there's a lot of things where I'm listening, and that on the other side, that person is like a very logical, like almost doctor, like,
Yes.
and that doesn't always illustrate even what I'm talking about. I think sometimes if you're really expressing to a friend, and that other person's like, I've gone through a sad time. Sometimes people look for someone else who's also in that emotional state, so you can hear them or at least feel.
They want more of a soundboard than
like
someone.
I mean, that's still part of
Like
listening.
at a rally,
Yeah.
at a rally, like hearing somebody speak at a rally,
Right.
when they're louder or in rage of something,
Right.
is what they're saying makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense under that
Okay.
context.
Oh, I like
so I think I appreciate that because like that, I think there's just certain emotional contexts where sometimes just someone be like, I'm listening, can almost make the other person feel worse if they're really sad and like just kind of stoically, like they might not think you're listening just because you can't be on the same emotional range as them. And that's just, again, not say you learned, but yeah, you have to connect.
So
you have
how-
to connect.
So, because you had the training for this, I presume,
I guess.
or at least the experience more so because of your craft, right?
Yeah.
I want to know, what do you do, I guess, with your facial expressions when you're listening to someone you cannot relate to? Right, because oftentimes when I'm talking to an individual, right, there is two things that I do, right? Depending on my level of connection with this individual, I'm either scrolling my phone, listening, right? But there's something that keeps me occupied, right, as a means of focus, right? Because there's sometimes when I'm staring at an individual directly, they're uncomfortable with the eyesight, then I am either studying their face too intimately, in which case I'm seeing every tweak of their eyes and their quivers of their lips, right, to see what they're relating to, what their emotional points of their words might land on, right? And that's just me studying an individual, right? But sometimes I realize when I make that level of contact, I am also there are moments in time when I'm like, and I'm like studying an individual and like, oh, that's sad, I'm sorry to hear that. And then there's other times when I'm like staring them dead in the eyes, I'm like listening to everything that they're saying and everything that their body's doing with their facial structure, right? And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm listening to you. I'm like understanding you.
Like they get thrown off by how active you are.
Exactly. So there are times when I'm like, all right, for me to not put them at a weary state, I often just scroll my phone, look at them occasionally, and go right back and scrolling my phone, right? Because I'm listening to them wholeheartedly, right? But
And then someone could think you scrolling your phone
why are you not giving me my full attention? I was like, all right, I will give you my full attention.
Well, this is. I'm glad we're on it because this is actually why I brought up like we're saying listening, but this is also a version just straight up communication, and I think communication happens on such a broad spectrum and scale. To answer what you had asked, I guess there are two things, and Nels, you probably also understand this. There's like sometimes if you're just behind camera. And all I'm doing is recording. I'm not doing an interview or anything. They're not talking to me. Your job is almost to be as invisible as possible, so you don't distract anything like that. So there's some leeway I have there. So if they're talking to camera, I just set it up. And there are people who like, because there are different things. So if I'm at a rally, someone is expressing, I'm behind camera. Sometimes there's so much expression, but because you're the cameraman, you kind of have to be like. Because you really, like, it's weird sometimes, because even if they're as long as there are other people in that crowd, their job is to cheer. Even if you validate and you're like, oh yeah, I'm with these guys, you have to be like, just kind of tweak your focus, make sure you're just not throwing off, because by being the person you're in control of what is being listened to once it's going out. So you have to kind of, if you're behind camera. If I'm doing an interview and I really don't agree or disagree about something I've learned to do to like, even if I like object, and I've been in this position to objectively disagree with something, what I will do is just ask a clarifying question that I actually have, but you have to ask it in a way where they're still expressing. So if they're like, I've done this before. I've interviewed people who are essentially just racist. You have to express like what makes you think that, or how do you get there, or like if usually there's more stuff like what brings you to this event, or what brought you to this event, and do you believe what this person is saying, or what's the opposition? But you have to do it in just not like a I'm angry kind of way, but you do have to let them express, and that's how I figured out how I can either listen more or express my frustration through having them elaborate even more, because I can still ask the things. Like again, under the context of my job is how I have to do it. But I will say, there's one of the hardest jobs I actually is listening. Where I work, there's a part where I'm just working audio. But in the building where I'm just working audio, there's cameras on me. So I'm not operating cameras. There's cameras on me because the whole room, you guys know what I do. So like everyone's like doing their votes and doing all that kind of stuff. And I've heard people stand up, say the most outlandish thing. I'm recording them and I have to stay stoic. I have to be like, have someone more or less disagree with my rights and be like, that's hard. Like at least being behind camera, I can kind of hide behind the camera. Being in this, it's very funny, but like that's the hardest part of the job.
But it's interesting. Well, first of all, I want to keep my word and say this is what I picked up from
Sympathy, empathy, and sympathy.
the difference between empathy and sympathy. According to this AI overview, it says while both terms relate to understanding someone else's emotions, empathy means actively sharing and experiencing another person's feelings as if they were your own, while sympathy is simply feeling sorry or concern for someone else's misfortune without necessarily feeling their emotions yourself. Essentially, empathy involves walking in someone else's shoes, while sympathy is more like feeling pity from a distance.
So did I get flipped?
Yeah, we might have flipped it once or twice.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
But I think
I just wanted to at least be honest with the audience. We
Yeah.
might have flipped it, so I do apologize.
no. The thing is that but those terms can sometimes easily get flipped
Yes.
because because I think that if I may utilize this metaphor or this visualization, listening puts on different clothes depending upon where listening exists. If I had to, make
I
it
think I
come
get
to
you.
life. So in other words, when you go to a rally and you're listening, you're anticipating a person at a rally, depending upon the rally, to be a little bit more robust in how they speak. A rally by itself, as opposed to a gathering, almost has intrinsically its own life, and so you expect, because I have a tendency now. One of the people what I do, so I have a. Am I allowed to say this? TikTok? I guess on TikTok.
Yeah,
I get, because on TikTok, I have a live, and sometimes I get concerned about what I'm allowed to say. So you'll hear me say things like schmill and schmurder, because that's because you're not allowed to say certain
But
things.
were you about saying TikTok?
No.
No,
But in
no,
other words, but TikTok on YouTube.
Gotcha.
Sometimes I don't know what the algorithm is allowed to say. So anyway, that I have my own
Censorship.
platform PTSD of what you're allowed to
No, I
say.
understand it. Yeah.
But one of the things that I find that's important to me when listening, as I go live and I'm listening to people who I can't see per se, but I'm looking at a camera and talking to people in certain cases, because I'll go on at late night and this and the other, and there are some people that have a heart song that I need to listen to. And I find my way of talking is slightly different, because there was a gentleman by the name of Roscoe Lee Brown, and I believe that talking with a certain amount of elegance and deliberate slowness, and using words that people might not use all the time, because people will listen. And you'll say things like "indeed" and things of that nature, and you slow it down. And this is for me, and because I want people to know that I'm listening and I'm hearing and I'm empathizing, I'm sympathizing, all of that, because sometimes we have to engage with people we don't see. And actually that's what we're doing here, and we are engaging with Mr. and Mrs. America, as well as ourselves, and
Pitbull.
and Pipple.
Mr. Worldwide.
Worldwide.
We're talking to everybody.
Well, we were talking to everybody. Yeah, that's
And
true.
Pipple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right. And we can forget that, just as I did. We're talking to people in different time zones. In fact,
Talking to people back in time.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln, I'm thinking of you.
Well, theoretically,
I don't think it's sorry.
but
Don't go to the theater, please.
But it's truthfully, we are speaking to people in back in time, because now we've placed our faces out there for in perpetuity. So we may be speaking to someone in 2087, and we want to say in 2087, we love what you've done with the roads. It's really, really impressive.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
but it is interesting. In fact, it's important to listen no matter what your situation is. I had brought up the concept of if you're angry, it's harder to listen. And I believe that's personally. If I'm angry or if I'm dealing with a certain amount, like in other words, if something drops on my toe,
Yeah. Fair.
it's very difficult for me to listen to you actively as I'm in pain.
Right. And I can also understand in those situations when we have an individual in our lives that might have given us a similar or the very same heart song, as you call it, over and over and over again, right?
Oof.
Without a resolve for themselves or a resolve that is. It could be either simple for anyone else to find, or we might consider it simple, right? It might just be a redundancy in our lives that we may not want to deal with continuously, right? So it might be a hard battle with yourself to give that person the space to talk about their grievances.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I do believe there can be something that's similar to empathy fatigue. If you feel like you're getting this, and I just think that's a true thing. Like there's a lot going on, and then sometimes people are expressing a lot, and I think as some people, I think we all pride ourselves on being able to listen and being supports.
Right.
And I do think it's something for if you are out there and you feel like you're a supportive member of your friend group, your family, or if you're the person who you believe always listens. I know a struggle can be, you're hearing a lot of, this is probably for therapists, you're hearing so many stories of so many people's struggles, and you can honestly feel for them. In fact, again, this is something that happened with news. Weird thing is you're going to a place where chaos. I actually had an experience, and I felt one of the things that actually made me want to step out of news for a little bit because I didn't like how it was affecting me is I went to, this is something that became my everyday for a while. I was at a house fire. So house on fire, burning building. And weirdly for me at this point, it's every day. The house fires are weirdly kind of like bread and butter news at some point. Like it's like this is going to be bad, but you go to a shooting like, we got to be there. House fire, yeah, we had nothing to do, find that person, right? So you go, and so I went there. I'm recording, and I'm in the what is like a safe jurisdiction for news. You can't just be like right on the field because firemen are taking care of things like that. Right. But I am at this point in a safe field of view, and I am on this person's property, and their house is being rented. So this woman comes out, and they start yelling at me. They start yelling at me like, "Get off my property! I didn't ask you to be here." And I'm working with the station I'm working on. I'm allowed to be there technically by the nature of my job, things like that. So I get to the point, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, why is this person yelling at me? Like, I'm doing my job. Doing this. And it did take me a second to be like, oh yeah, their whole life is being burnt down, literally. Wow. They can be upset. But for a second, I was just like, why are you mad at me? I didn't do anything. And I'm like, and I had to step back, and I adjusted, step back, but I did hate the fact that for a second, I just forgot that was going on. Because for me, I'm just like, the house is just on fire. You're fine.
Interesting.
It happens.
So what happens is, so really quickly, because we only got a couple of minutes left, we can also all work in fields where our skills of listening can become desensitized because we're dealing with it all day. That's why sometimes people at the DMV sometimes get they get a very bad shake because all they're doing is hearing people and they're, so let's kind of close this out with this. We're going to give you 3 tips from various fields on our own personal thing of what we believe is good for better listening skills. This is in no way suggesting that we're doing this scientifically, just our own preferences. Go.
All right. I find it better to connect. You kind of touch on this, but make sure you're connected with the individual, even if you don't know them, but it's sometimes, I think, finding that emotional range and connecting with that specifically so you can, if someone if you want to listen, you also make sure they feel comfortable expressing. So I think connecting is that, laying out the table, making sure you're connecting to them. It feels comfortable. And then that's how you're really being listened to and listening to.
Okay.
All right. I believe that you should also keep in mind that you have friends in your life that always want to be heard, even if they are not the ones to speak up about their situations on the forefront immediately, right? And please understand your place in your friend group, whether or not you are the one who talks or you're the one who listens. And always find someone you can always have listen to you if you are the listener of your immediate friend group.
All right. And lastly, you have one mouth and two ears for a reason, they say, because it's more important to hear a person than to speak. But then again, we do have two lips, which I think changes. But the point I'm trying to make is do your best to listen to those who are around you. We here at Various Fields want to hear you and listen to you by your response. So do your best to be a very good listener and recognize that your listening is going to help with communication. I love you guys so much. I hope you hear that. I hope you listen to that. And we love you all for coming out here and checking us out at Various Fields.
We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening.
Peace.